Hello everyone! Today I wanted to highlight my favorite game from the GSL round of 32. It was in Group B, Match 3 I think, and Map 3, between Maru, the pretty much consensus best player in the world, best Terran in the world certainly, and Leenock, someone who you might not even know who he is, depending on how new you are to the game. Leenock wasn't considered an even, I would say, top 5, top 10 Zerg player going into this tournament, but he managed to change minds with his performances. I'm going to leave a link to the game itself. If you didn't manage to see it yet, I recommend watching that first and then coming back to the video. But if you've already seen the game, I think you're going to enjoy this video, this breakdown, and I'm going to mostly be focusing on what happened and why it was so amazing. From the very start, we see Maru up to his usual shit, trying to proxy, but Leenock does a brilliant scout with the overword and basically screws his build over. From this point, Maru goes into plan B, proxying just one barracks and trying to block the hatchery, which he fails so slightly. Already everything is going for Leenock in this game. Now here is where Maru does something very strange. He puts a barracks down on the scout path of the overword. The overword saw the SCV, it's going to see the barracks too. So unbelievably strange, but I guess he wanted to cause an overreaction, which Leenock actually does for a couple of seconds, then he figures it out. So this second barracks is a complete failure. And Artosis and Tasteless even mention that if Leenock let him build the barracks, it would be even worse for Maru. But Leenock decides to stop him. Maru realizes how behind he is and does the Marine King move of putting down one CC and deciding, you know what, I am already behind, time to put down a second CC. So he goes 3 CC with no defense, basically banking on the fact Leenock isn't going to fuck with him. Keep in mind that Maru is an extremely experienced player in holding Zerg wins, so he is more than likely practiced this. He can hold a potential follow-up of just Lings and Banes maybe. So it looks a lot more dangerous than it actually is for Maru himself, and he even manages to pick off one drone with his Reaper. Immediately after he gets 200 gas, Leenock goes into the lair, and this basically means some sort of a win or a fast Mutalisk play. A-win is extremely more likely. Maru fails to scan the main with the Reaper, and at this point it looks like Leenock is just going to win. Faking even the third base, absolutely brilliant by Leenock, but Maru does the one move that helps him secure his spot in the game. He uses a scan on the main and spots the lair. And not only does he spot the lair, he even sees the lair finishing. Leenock hesitates for a second, then decides roaches aren't going to work and puts down a spire. Maru briefly checks the turret and then decides to use his medivac to load the Hellions in and go in for harass on the main. Because of Leenock's choice of build and not building a lot of Zerglings to defend, even if he built more Zerglings, he couldn't stop the Hellbats effectively. He doesn't have too many queens considering the amount of bases, and the Hellbats get so much damage in. Maru also out-multitasks Leenock because he attacks the main and the third base simultaneously, getting around 17 drone kills by the end of the attack. Not only does Maru get all these drone kills, which are fucking over Leenock completely, he gets to confirm the Mutas, meaning he can set up his defenses. Just as the Mutas arrive into Maru's base, Leenock puts down a Roach Warren, and as Artosis and Tasteless mentioned, this is a very old build, meaning Leenock doesn't actually plan to stay on Mutas, Lings and Banes. He wants to do a Roach win and fucking murder Maru before the game gets too long. Now, the problem with this is that the Mutas are supposed to force a lot of anti-air, not so many siege tanks, but fortunately for Maru, he gets at least a couple of tanks out and he can actually hold the Roach push, thanks to not overreacting to Mutalisks. To Leenock's credit, the Mutalisks end up doing so much damage for him. Like, he makes more use of these Mutas than any other unit he made in the game. At around 840, Maru decides to do a random ass push with 2 siege tanks, which completely fucks him over because Leenock was hiding roaches all this time, immediately takes out the 2 tanks, gets his upgrades ready and engages a bit too prematurely, but still manages to clean up Terran, while still harassing with his Mutalisks. Brilliant play by Leenock. Maru realizes the gravity of situation, he knows he can't possibly go back now that he lost his siege tanks and needs to buy time with his medivacs and marines, which he does brilliantly. Not only does Leenock react perfectly though, he manages to pick off the most important medivac with his Mutalisks and basically destroys Maru's harassment. At around 10 minutes we get to see the units lost up, and when have you ever seen a Terran have more lost resources than Zerg? Leenock is absolutely destroying Maru. He has slightly less workers, but he has a much bigger army. He only has to take care of 2 siege tanks, something that's extremely easy to do. He needs to break in the front and murder Maru with roaches and ravagers. Leenock destroys Maru's wall at around 10:20 and has a huge army, but doesn't attack, and starts +2 attack. I think this is where things start to turn. Maru takes 2 medivacs and is like, this push in front of my base isn't getting healed any easier if I have these 2 medivacs at home. I need to harass Leenock, I need to make him turn around, because right now he can kill me. Maru realizes the size of the army coming at him and moves his siege tank to the higher ground. This siege tank will win Maru the game because Leenock is wasting so much time, and not only is Leenock wasting so much time, he panic attacks at around 11 minutes and isn't even microing his army. Maru realizes the gravity of the situation and even pulls SCVs to tank for his units, his fighting units, and manages somehow to destroy Leenock's vastly superior army, because Leenock isn't microing. Leenock is trying to defend his own base, which is a major flaw of his attack, and also Maru somehow manages to micro on both fronts, of course, because he's that fucking good, and takes out Leenock's 3rd and 4th base, effectively leaving him not mining. Just as Maru picks up after killing Leenock's 4th base, Leenock has to turn around because he's lost too many units due to not microing, and now he realizes, I'm about to get fucking killed. The army sizes are now equal, Leenock's supply lead is entirely in workers, so Maru keeps scouting his army with his medivacs, the medivacs he still hasn't lost, because Leenock hasn't rebuilt any Mutalisks, and with his last resources, gas-wise, Leenock decides to build Corruptors, which I think was the nail in the coffin. Maru perfectly realizes his only advantage is the fact Leenock isn't mining, and that's why he needs to pounce. Maru's killer instinct comes out and he pushes forward, knowing full well he lost a lot of workers to not die to Leenock's push. And now all he has to do is make sure Leenock doesn't get another mining base, a close mining base, and he wins the game, because roaches and ravagers don't scale into the late game, regardless of how many upgrades you decide to take. Leenock tries to dump some of his minerals by building extra hatches everywhere, he even tries to take a sketchy 5th base, but it's far too late to think about getting bases. His Corruptors don't do anything, he tries to kill a few medivacs, who cares. Even Maru's air siege tanks come in and start killing off the ground army. Corruptors weren't the right choice, unfortunately, and Leenock's hesitation compared to Maru's decisiveness is why he ends up losing this game. What amazes me about this game is that staring down the barrel of a gun, Maru actually decides to load up medivacs and counterattack the Zerg, knowing full well a couple of more extra units aren't going to hold this phenomenal push if Leenock has all his cards in order. If Leenock sends a few overlords in, if Leenock micros his army instead of getting focused on his own bases, he might crush the Terran's army and then just win the game. But instead, Maru manages to micro on 2 fronts, do all the correct decisions, use every resource he has to stay in this game, to win this game. Every worker Maru has is another unit he uses to take advantage of his position, and Leenock just falls to a player who has a much better killer instinct in the end. I loved watching this game because it really shows you the tenacity of a fucking winner. Maru never gave up in the game, his start was complete dogshit. A lot of players depend on their start, meaning if some things start going wrong, they're absolutely fucked. Maru is not one of those players, he can always come back from behind, he plays from behind better than some people play from ahead. He manages to do the impossible, seemingly, and I know a lot of people are going to say if Leenock just had one overword, he could have destroyed that push. I disagree. Maru was going to hold either way because Leenock wasn't focused on that. Maru's counterattack killing the third and fourth base is actually what won him the game. The hold was pretty crucial, of course. You can't win the game if you don't murder the Zerg's army, but Maru's moves and decisiveness is what really ends up winning the game, and I hope you guys can appreciate that as well, regardless of which race you play. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. I might do more in the future. I just really enjoyed this game and wanted to share with you if you somehow managed to miss it. Thanks as always for watching, see you on the next video, whenever the fuck that is. Bye.